And in real-life medieval history, this is the major chapter break between the High Middle Ages and the Late Middle Ages. In terms of big socioeconomic trends, for the first time there weren't enough laborers to go around. That before, you could pay them next to nothing, the commoners, whatever, it didn't matter, you could always get replacements. For the first time in centuries, there weren't enough to go around, and with labor in short supply, because there was a plague, you could bargain for more money. You could more often run away to a different lord offering better pay. And the lords at the time could not understand this. This was an alien concept to them. They'd been living for centuries with, well, you just charge what you want and they're tied to the land. Now it was collective bargaining? That if you don't pay me, I'll run? That other people are paying more? The alien concept. I mean, it was, what TV tropes calls an outside context event.
The English usually worked more, but this wasn't because they were naturally more industrious. It's because they were historically more exploited by their aristocracy. When there was a labor shortage in the 14th century, English laborers immediately used their clout to create more time off for themselves. For a time, English workers enjoyed 51% of days free from work.
One of the most common myths in European economic history, and indeed in economics itself, is that the Black Death, followed by other waves of bubonic plague, led to an abrupt rise in real wages for both agricultural laborers and urban artisans, a rise that supposedly ushered in the so-called Golden Age of the English laborer, lasting until the early 16th century. This line of thought comes from David Ricardo, who held that, all other things being equal, depopulation led to falling grain prices, lower rents on grain-producing lands, and land in general, and increased real wages from bargaining power. The fall in population from the 1300 peak, which was perhaps as high as a 50% decline by the late 15th century, was presumed to have changed the land-labor ratio enough to increase the marginal productivity of labor, and thus its real wage. Additionally, the rise in real wages would have been a product of the fall in the cost of living, especially in prices of bread and grain. These came from the abandonment of high-cost marginal lands and the rise in the marginal productivity of agricultural labor, but the evidence from administrative records shows otherwise. While there is no doubt that real wages in mid to late 15th century England did reach a peak far higher than that ever achieved in past centuries, real wages in England did not, in fact, rise immediately after the Black Death. In southern England, real wages of building craftsmen, both rural and urban, had plummeted with the Great Famine. Then they rose to a new peak around 1336 to 1340, but then their real wages fell during the 1340s and continued their decline after the onslaught of the Black Death, indeed into the 1360s. Not until the later 1370s, almost 30 years after the Black Death, did real wages finally recover and then rapidly surpass the peak achieved in the late 1330s. Thereafter, the rise in real wages was more or less continuous, though at generally slower rates, during the 15th century, reaching a peak around 1476 to 1480, and at a level not thereafter surpassed until 1886 to 1890. Finally, the Black Death in England saw 30 years of high grain prices, explaining how real wages plummeted after the Black Death. So, why does the historical evidence contradict Ricardo's optimistic narrative? To understand this discrepancy, we must delve deeper into the economic and socio-political landscape of 14th century England, as meticulously analyzed by John Munro. The 14th century opened with the end of a long-sustained period of inflation, which had begun as far back as the 1180s. This inflation was accompanied by a sustained population growth, which possibly came to an end with the Great Famine. The Great Famine was a period of extreme scarcity and hardship, resulting from a combination of adverse weather conditions, crop failures, and subsequent food shortages. John Munro explores why population growth alone cannot explain the sustained inflation observed during this period. While population growth can account for rising grain prices due to increased demand, it does not fully explain the broader inflationary trends affecting most goods and services of the time. The absence of technological advancements in agriculture, combined with the law of diminishing returns, meant that even with more labor available, the productivity did not keep pace with the growing population. Munro argues that the real driver behind the inflation was not merely population growth, but a complex interplay of monetary expansion and the limitations of the agrarian economy. The period saw significant monetary expansion in terms of both the stocks of coined money and their flows, which contributed to a general rise in prices. This monetary explanation complements the demographic factors, providing a more comprehensive understanding of the economic conditions preceding the Black Death. One of the most striking aspects of the 14th century economy was its violent oscillation in monetary flows, prices, and wages. Munro identifies two prolonged periods of inflation, each followed by extended deflations. Understanding these fluctuations is key to comprehending the delayed recovery in real wages after the Black Death. Post-Great Famine, England experienced a significant contraction in its money supply. This contraction was characterized by a severe reduction in mint outputs, particularly of silver coins, which were the predominant form of currency. The mean annual outputs of silver coins fell drastically from a peak of £125,836 sterling in 1306 to 1310 to a mere £381 in 1326 to 1330. This decline continued until about 1346, just before the Black Death struck. The scarcity of coined money led to a prolonged period of deflation, as reflected in the Phelps-Brown-Hopkins price index, which fell by approximately 35% from 138 in 1321 to just 90 in 1341. This deflationary period was not a consequence of population decline, as some scholars like Poston suggested, but rather a genuine monetary contraction. The reduced money supply, coupled with sustained or even increasing economic output, caused prices to fall across most sectors, not just in grain. Munro emphasizes that this deflation was a result of significant monetary contraction, driven by factors such as the depletion of precious metal mines and the limited output of coined money. The reduction in the money supply meant that there was less money circulating in the economy, leading to falling prices despite the population growth and increased demand for goods. The Black Death of 1348 was a catastrophic event that decimated the population, with estimates suggesting a decline of up to 50% in some regions. Contrary to the Ricardoian view, this depopulation did not immediately translate into higher real wages. Instead, the economic aftermath was characterized by continued deflation and wage suppression. Following the Black Death, real wages did not rise as anticipated. Instead, the combination of a contracted money supply and deflationary pressures meant that wages remained low. In southern England, wages for building craftsmen, both rural and urban, continued to decline into the 1360s. It wasn't until nearly 3 decades later, in the late 1370s, that real wages began to recover, eventually surpassing their earlier peaks by the mid-15th century. Munro's analysis reveals that the immediate economic impact of the Black Death was not a surge in real wages, but rather a continuation of the deflationary trend that had already begun before the plague. This prolonged period of economic instability delayed the anticipated wage increases, challenging the simplistic narrative of a post-plague golden age. One of the primary reasons for the delayed recovery in real wages was the English government's intervention through wage freezes and labour ordinances. The Statute of Labourers of 1351 was a pivotal piece of legislation aimed at stabilising wages by fixing them at pre-plague levels and restricting labour mobility. Monroe highlights that these regulations were both unreasonable and cruel, as they attempted to cap wages when both money and real wages were exceptionally low. The statute specifically set the maximum summer wages for master masons, carpenters, and tilers at 3 pence per day, and 1.5 pence for their servants and laborers. Despite these controls, manorial records often show that wages were frequently paid above these statutory limits, indicating widespread non-compliance and the difficulty of enforcing such measures. The enforcement of these statutes varied significantly across regions. While urban centers like London began to see wage increases earlier due to higher living costs and greater demand for skilled labor, rural areas and smaller manors struggled to comply, resulting in persistent wage suppression until the early 15th century. Monroe emphasizes that the socio-political environment of the time further complicated the economic landscape. Landlords and governing bodies were intent on maintaining economic stability and preserving their own interests, often at the expense of laborers. This regulatory environment contributed to the prolonged period of low real wages following the Black Death. Monroe's analysis also highlights significant regional variations across England and broader Europe. While some areas, like London, began to see wage increases earlier, driven by higher living costs and stronger enforcement of wage controls, other regions lagged behind. In many manorial estates, wages remained stubbornly low until the early 15th century, despite occasional exceptions for senior craftsmen. For instance, in London, the city issued its own wage ordinance in 1350, setting higher wages for building craftsmen than those stipulated by the National Statute of Labourers. This move reflected the higher cost of living and the greater bargaining power of skilled artisans in urban centres. Conversely, in regions like Norfolk, Bruce Campbell's research indicates continued population growth despite the broader crisis, suggesting a different economic trajectory compared to areas like Essex and Suffolk, which experienced pronounced population declines and wage stagnation. These regional disparities underscore the importance of localized factors in shaping economic outcomes. Factors such as local governance, the presence of skilled labor, and the availability of resources played pivotal roles in determining how different areas responded to the economic challenges of the time. To fully grasp the economic fluctuations of the 14th century, Monroe employs key monetary theories such as the Fisher identity and the Cambridge cash balances approach. The Fisher identity provides a framework for understanding the relationship between these variables. In the context of post-plague England, the population decline led to a contraction in real output. However, the money supply did not decrease proportionately, resulting in an increased per capita money supply. This imbalance caused prices to rise, leading to inflationary pressures despite the deflationary environment created by the contracted money supply. Monroe emphasizes that this deflation was a result of significant monetary contraction, driven by factors such as the depletion of precious metal mines and the limited output of coined money. The reduction in the money supply meant that there was less money circulating in the economy, leading to falling prices despite the population growth and increased demand for goods. The Cambridge cash balances approach further elucidates this dynamic by examining the relationship between money supply, price levels, and real income. Monroe uses this framework to demonstrate that the contraction in England's money supply, coupled with increasing demand for money due to population decline and economic growth, resulted in sustained deflationary pressures. Here, K represents the cash balances, or the demand for money relative to income and prices. As real national income contracted, the demand for money did not decrease sufficiently to offset the rise in prices, leading to deflation. Another critical factor Monroe examines is the role of the English crown in shaping the money supply. Unlike other European nations, the English crown undertook only minimal coinage debasement during the late 14th century. This limited intervention meant that the contraction in the money supply was not significantly countered by efforts to increase the supply of coined money. The depletion of silver mines in Germany and Central Europe further exacerbated the scarcity of coined money. As European economies continued to grow, the demand for silver coins increased, but the supply remained constrained due to the declining output of silver mines. This scarcity contributed to the prolonged period of deflation, as there was not enough money circulating to support the economic activities of the time. Moreover, the English crown's foreign military expenditures led to significant outflows of bullion. However, Monroe notes that the contraction in mint outputs and the onset of deflation began before these military expenditures became significant, suggesting that other factors, such as the depletion of silver mines, were more critical in reducing the money supply. This nuanced understanding of monetary policy highlights the complex interplay between domestic economic conditions and external expenditures, further complicating the economic recovery narrative. Beyond the economic data, Monroe explores the socio-psychological impact of the Black Death and subsequent warfare on economic behaviors. The immense loss of life and the pervasive sense of mortality fostered a fatalistic yet hedonistic outlook among survivors. This shift in societal attitudes is evident in contemporary literature and art, such as Boccaccio's Decameron, which portrays characters engaging in lavish spending and indulgent lifestyles. Monroe suggests that these psychological changes may have influenced spending habits, contributing to increased demand for goods and services. However, the scarcity of coined money meant that this surge in spending could not be sustained, further driving inflationary pressures and complicating the economic recovery. This change in cultural attitudes towards life and death may have contributed to economic volatility, as people sought to make the most of their limited time and resources, further complicating the economic landscape. To provide a comprehensive understanding, Monroe situates England within the broader European context. Regions such as Flanders, Tuscany, and Aragon-Navarre faced similar economic challenges, but responded differently based on their unique socio-political and economic conditions. For instance, in Provence and Tuscany, significant population declines were often linked to the rampant warfare of the period, rather than just the Black Death. These regions also experienced deflationary pressures, but their responses varied. Monroe's analysis emphasizes that while England focused on maintaining wage controls through statutes like the Statute of Labourers, other regions employed different strategies based on their specific economic and political context. In regions like Flanders, with their robust textile industries, the economic pressures and responses differed from those in agrarian-dominated areas like Tuscany. This comparative analysis underscores the importance of regional policies and external factors in shaping economic outcomes, demonstrating that the economic aftermath of the Black Death was not monolithic, but rather a tapestry of varied experiences. The economic shocks of the 14th century set the stage for profound long-term transformations in England's economy. The prolonged period of low real wages and monetary instability contributed to significant shifts in labor relations, land use, and agricultural practices. Monroe traces these developments, illustrating how the economic landscape of medieval England evolved in response to the challenges posed by population decline and economic volatility. These transformations laid the groundwork for the later economic transitions that would shape England's path towards modernity. The persistent wage suppression and monetary contraction necessitated innovations in labor markets and economic policies, fostering a more flexible and resilient economic system. Monroe highlights that these early adaptations were crucial in enabling England to navigate the complex economic challenges of the later medieval period and beyond. This period of economic adjustment was instrumental in shaping the socio-economic fabric of England, setting the stage for the significant transformations of the Renaissance and the early modern era. Monroe's study overturns the simplistic narrative of an immediate post-plague golden age. Instead, it presents a nuanced picture of real wage dynamics, marked by initial declines, a brief recovery, and a prolonged period of stabilization and growth. This complexity is a testament to the intricate interplay between monetary policies labor market regulations, and regional economic conditions. The delayed rise in real wages underscores the importance of understanding the multifaceted nature of economic recovery. It highlights that labor scarcity alone is insufficient to drive wage increases without supportive economic policies and adequate money supply. The interaction between nominal wages and price levels played a crucial role in determining real wages, and the efforts to control wages through legislation had significant implications for the overall economic recovery. Moreover, the selective enforcement of wage controls in different regions created disparities in wage levels, contributing to economic inequalities that persisted for decades. These inequalities influenced labor relations and social structures, shaping the economic and social landscape of England in profound ways. The economic aftermath of the Black Death in England offers valuable lessons for understanding economic resilience and adaptation in the face of catastrophic events. Munro's in-depth analysis reveals that economic recovery is not a linear process, but rather a complex journey influenced by many factors. In unraveling the economic threads of post-plague England, we discover a narrative far richer and more complex than the legend of the Golden Age suggests. It is a story of resilience, adaptation, and the enduring interplay between population, money, and wages.
Et semper rememorator, non omnes vagantes aberarunt.